That we're waiting on God to always come and move us. We're waiting on Him to come drag us out of our seat. We're waiting on Him to come lift us up every day. He says fullness of joy is not that. And we're going to show you here in a minute. It is not Him coming and lifting you up. Because when He come and lifted you up, if you was full of joy in them waters of living water that you really got to drink, He said you'd never thirst again. He's a liar, or it's true, and we have not got a hold of them living waters like we're supposed to. And the reason being because He comes and does it. We don't move by faith to go get it. We don't have enough faith to go get the drink of the living water. We're waiting on Him to come and deliver it. And then expect to drink from the living water. He said they're in you and in me. You're not going to come to me and get, you have to get them outside of you. My Spirit's in you. You're going to have to bring them out and churn them up. If you want them, you can drink anytime you want to. You can call on me and you can drink anytime you want to. But today people are thirsty, they're hungry, they're miserable, they're poor, they're blind, they're naked, they're wretched, they're miserable, and all these things. It just keeps going and going. Because we're not walking by faith. Are you paying too much attention to what you see and the way you feel? He's saying clearly the spiritual things are what you hear. It's just like the wind. And you ought to pay attention and listen to people. And you'll know who's got it and who ain't. You'll know who's a mature Christian and who's not. And I haven't heard a lot of them. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't. A lot of ministers are not mature. I can hear it in their voice. I can hear them speak. That they're not willing to sacrifice or whatever, but you can hear them, that break in them. If you listen to them, you'll hear where they're really at in the Spirit. You don't pay attention to what they wear, how they dress, what they do, but listen to what they say. And you'll know if they're spiritual or not. You'll know if I'm spiritual or not. If you listen to the things that I say. You know, I was talking to my cousin today, and he's right about talking about we come to church with a certain tradition or expectation and the way that we think people should be and situations should be when we all are unique individuals. That we should just worship God how we are. God made us all different. And He wants us just to worship Him just like we are. However we are, He knows what kind of situations you're in tonight. He knows what kind of problems you're going through. He knows the real you, but we'll put on false faces or change ourselves to satisfy what the church wants or the way we think church should be, and we'll go through that. Really, are we what we should be? Are we getting in bondage again? Are we getting ourselves tied down? Because if you ever notice, there's a group of people that's real miserable by the ways that they do. I don't want to say, but we all know. They're real miserable because they're sticking to traditions and things because they think that's the way they're supposed to be. So why are they so miserable if they're so holy? When Christ said you could be full of joy. You want to know why? They're trying to pull into something that God don't want to take them into. And they're trying to dress a part and do things that they think that they should be doing when all they need to do is hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He don't say, see what the Spirit says. He don't say, feel what the Spirit says. Hear what the Spirit says. Like the wind blows. Have you ever sat and listened to the wind? I can hear it coming on our mountaintops. You can hear it coming a ways off, but you don't feel it. And that's the way we ought to recognize the Spirit of God. We ought to be able to recognize, oh, I hear Him coming. I hear Him coming. I know He's coming, or He's coming from, or He's going, but man, ain't it great that God's coming by. Ain't it great that He's going to come by and see us? Ain't it wonderful to know that I hear that wind a-coming, but we don't even recognize it? And how many times has He been by to rescue us or whatever, and we've not even recognized it because we've been paying attention to what we see and how we feel, and He could have walked right by on that boat that night because they was looking for Him, but they wasn't listening for Him. They could have missed Him because they wasn't listening for Him. You know that? If they'd have been listening for Him, they'd have heard the wind coming. They'd have heard Him blowing because He's purely spiritual. Just as Spirit of Spirit could be. He had flesh at that time. But He's the living Word. So man, they could have heard that man coming if they'd have paid attention. They would have known He was walking on the water. I bet you could have heard His footsteps on the water and said, what is that? What is that walking on that water? What's going on? And never seen Him. And being frightened by it. But are you listening? Or are you paying too much attention to what you see and what you feel? Allowing the enemy to get in and cause all these problems and all these situations. How are you paying attention to people around you? Lives around you. Is it because they dress the part or because they're speaking the part? Which one is it? This is how you should be able to tell spiritual things. This is how you should be able to judge spiritual things. Listen. Be quick to hear. That's why he said it's so important to watch what you hear. Pay attention to what you hear. Watch the things that you hear. Because you'll grab hold of what you hear. He knows it. If the devil gets you or your carnal mind gets you, you're going to grab a hold of it. When situations are arising or problems are arising, are you listening to what the Spirit says, or are you paying attention to what you say or Satan says? Well, if you're paying attention to what you say or Satan's saying, you're miserable. If you're paying attention to what the Word says, you'll have joy. When we pay attention to what we see and the things around us and how we feel, it's not spiritual. And what he say, that's an enemy against God. When you go by carnal mind. When you look with carnal eyes and how your flesh feels, that's carnal. And that's why people today are in trouble with how they feel and what's going on in their life. They're paying too much attention to these things. When we need to push out of the rim by faith in toward what he's saying, real faith is going by what you hear. Simple as it can be. Faith comes by hearing. It's hearing, period. Nothing to do with nothing else. What the Word says or what the Spirit says, period. That's all it is. But are you going on what God says in His Word or things He's told you, striving and running for the open door, the opportunities before us? Or are you allowing what you see and what you feel, your carnal mind and things, to pull you off? Are you paying attention to the numbers? Are you paying attention to people? Are you paying attention to situations in your life? If you are, I'll guarantee you misery. If you will follow Spirit, if you will follow what He's told us about Habakkuk, get the vision and see it clearly. The only vision you need to know is what the Spirit says. That's the only vision you need to know. That's the only things you need to write down. Nothing about your problems, your situations, what the Spirit says to the churches. Period. That's the only vision you need, because if you've got any other vision, which is any other thoughts, any other guidance in there, you better be getting them out. Because that's what you're hearing. That's what you're becoming. And that's why he said it's so important, and why he talked about the parable of the sower being so important. Because he knew that our minds would wander. He knew that the enemy would use our minds against a spiritual warfare. He knew that the enemy would tamper our ground and make our ground hard by the things that we hear, the situations around us. And he made this way so that we could build trust in God without seeing God. We would trust Him whether we felt Him or whether we didn't. And because some of you have been a while without feeling the Spirit of God, you think God's forsaken you. But where does He say anything about feeling? If you're feeling unworthy or whatever, you're listening to the wrong voice, unless you've done something wrong. If you're feeling unworthy, you're listening to what the enemy's saying you must be loved. You ain't felt the Spirit of God in forever. You want to know why He's saying it? Because He heard you say it. He can't say it unless you say it. He can't bring it up unless you bring it up, or your mind's thinking it. One of the two, because you're beginning to question yourself. And dry places, feeling. Well, it is great to feel the Spirit of God. It is great to be stirred up. But if you really want to see the powers of God, they only come by faith, not by feeling. They only come by hearing and not by seeing. That's the only way you're going to see it. The mighty powers of God manifest. You can't wait till you see in the Spirit move or feeling the Spirit move. You've got to jump in with faith and go into the door of opportunity. What was that next set of scriptures I wrote down, Lisa? All of them? Okay. All right. 10 through 21. I didn't know I wrote down that many. Yeah. All right, 10 through 20. Jesus answered and said unto him, Art thou a master of Israel, and knowest not these things? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, we speak that we do know, and testify that we have seen.